Cartoons aren't always meant for kids. Some are so bizarre, so over the top, that they veer into territory you'd never expect to find on Saturday mornings. These weren't bright, harmless shows with catchy jingles. These were wild, disturbing, and sometimes downright confusing experiments in animation that gained loyal cult audiences. Which ones are still considered groundbreaking, and which ones remain infamous disasters? Let's jump into 15 cult cartoons that shocked, fascinated, and broke every rule. Fritz the Cat, 1972. Imagine walking into a theater expecting a cartoon comedy and instead being hit with gritty city streets, hustlers, and counterculture chaos. That was Fritz the Cat, Ralph Bakshi's legendary shockwave of animation. Based on Robert Crumb's underground comic, it wasn't the gags or the talking animals that stunned audiences. It was how raw and unfiltered it felt. Fritz ran wild through New York, dabbling in every reckless scene of the era, from student protests to shady backroom deals. The film hit theaters in 1972, proudly stamped with an X rating, the first cartoon to ever earn one. That rating alone turned it into a cultural event. Parents condemned it, critics fought over it, and young adults lined up around the block. Why? Because Fritz was saying the quiet part out loud. It mocked politics, race relations, and the so-called peace and love generation with a sneer. Some reviewers called it genius, others thought it was a crude mess. Robert Crumb, the creator of the original comics, even distanced himself from the movie, unhappy with how Bakshi spun his character into a chaotic mascot for rebellion. But here's the kicker. Controversy made it unstoppable. Fritz the Cat went on to become the most successful independent animated film of its time. Its influence is still felt in every cartoons for adults show that came after. Whether you see it as groundbreaking or offensive, Fritz proved one thing: animation didn't have to play by anyone's rules. Heavy Traffic, 1973. If Fritz cracked the door open, Heavy Traffic kicked it off the hinges. Ralph Bakshi's follow-up was darker, meaner, and somehow even stranger. This wasn't just a cartoon. It was a portrait of a city teetering on the edge of collapse. Mixing animation with live action, Bakshi dropped viewers into 1970s New York, a place full of hustlers, broken families, and back-alley dreams that never came true. The story followed an underground cartoonist named Michael Corleone, but don't let the name fool you, this wasn't some mafia tale. It was a grimy, surreal ride through violence, urban decay, and twisted humor. Characters drifted between caricature and nightmare, as if the city itself had sprung to life in grotesque form. One moment, you're watching slapstick gags. The next, you're staring at raw human despair. When Heavy Traffic premiered in 1973, critics didn't know what to do with it. Some called it brilliant social satire. Others dismissed it as filth, masquerading as art. But one thing was clear. This wasn't Saturday morning material. It was aimed squarely at adults, and it made no apologies about its raw themes. Over time, it earned cult respect for being ahead of its time. Fans saw in it a rare honesty about city life and the struggles that animation usually ignored. Today it's studied as one of Bakshi's boldest works, a cartoon that dared to stare into the abyss and sketch what it saw. Coonskin, 1975. Now, here's one that didn't just ruffle feathers, it set off fire alarms. Coonskin, Ralph Bakshi's most polarizing film, blended live action with animation in a biting satire about race, corruption, and survival in America's urban underworld. Its central characters, voiced by Barry White and Scatman Crothers, navigated a city where every stereotype and symbol was cranked up to the extreme. The film premiered in 1975 and was met immediately with protests. Some civil rights groups denounced it as harmful, while defenders argued it was actually attacking prejudice by exaggerating it. Either way, the uproar was so loud that theaters pulled it, cities banned it, and the film practically vanished in some regions. Bakshi himself insisted it was misunderstood, that it was satire designed to confront uncomfortable truths. And for some, that rang true. For others, the shock value overwhelmed the message. The mixed reception gave it an infamous edge, and that edge turned into cult legend over time. Today, Coonskin remains one of the most talked about animated films in American history. Not because it was universally praised, but because it dared to run straight into controversy without blinking. Love it or hate it, it's a milestone in proving how far animation could push against the walls of cultural comfort. The Maxx, 1995. MTV was known for music videos, but in the 90s it also became a home for bizarre cartoons. Among them was The Maxx, a short-lived yet unforgettable series based on Sam Keith's comic. On the surface, it looked like another superhero parody, but dig deeper and you found a dark psychological story about trauma, identity, and the blurry line between fantasy and reality. The Maxx himself was a hulking figure in purple rags, living in an alley but also existing in a strange dream world called the Outback. His ally, social worker Julie, was caught between helping him and facing her own past. Episodes jump between gritty city life and surreal landscapes, leaving viewers constantly off balance. What made The Maxx special was its refusal to explain everything. It embraced ambiguity, daring audiences to piece together meaning. The result was haunting, confusing, and oddly beautiful. When it aired in 1995, mainstream audiences didn't quite know what to make of it. But those who stuck with it recognized it as something rare, animation as psychological art. Despite only lasting 13 episodes, The Maxx left a mark. Fans still praise its bold visuals and layered storytelling, and it's often cited as one of MTV's best experiments. In a decade full of wild cartoons, this one proved that weird could also be deeply human. Aeon Flux, 1991 to 1995. If you thought The Maxx was strange, Aeon Flux took strange and made it stylish. Premiering on MTV's Liquid Television, Aeon Flux was a futuristic fever dream of action, espionage, and surrealism. The star was Aeon herself, a leather-clad assassin with acrobat skills and a tendency to meet abrupt ends. In fact, early shorts often killed her off in absurd ways, only for her to return the next episode without explanation. The animation was angular, fluid, and often unsettling. Dialogue was minimal, storylines were cryptic. It felt like watching someone's dream set to motion. Audiences either loved the mystery or gave up trying to understand it. That confusion was part of the charm. Aeon Flux wasn't about clarity. It was about mood, danger, and pushing the boundaries of animated storytelling. By the time it became a full series in the mid-90s, it had cemented its cult following. Fans debated its symbolism, its politics, and even its sense of humor. Others just enjoyed the wild visuals and the fearless unpredictability of its lead character. What makes Aeon Flux legendary is how unapologetically different it was. It didn't try to explain itself or appeal to everyone. It was weird, bold, and entirely its own thing, and that's exactly why it became a cult favorite. Duckman, 1994 to 1997. If you thought animated detectives were supposed to be clever, noble, or even halfway functional, Duckman blew that idea to pieces. This late-night series starred Jason Alexander as the voice of Duckman, a foul-mouthed, lazy, and perpetually angry private investigator who spent more time complaining about life than solving cases. The show debuted in 1994 on USA Network and immediately stood out for its sharp edge. The animation style was jagged and chaotic, perfectly matching Duckman's personality. Storylines leaned into outrageous humor, often mocking politics, social norms, and the very idea of morality. Supporting characters like Corn-Fed Pig, Duckman's deadpan partner, balanced the madness with dead-serious delivery that made the absurdity even funnier. What made Duckman a cult hit wasn't just the jokes, it was the surprising depth hidden beneath the chaos. Episodes often ended on unexpectedly emotional notes, tackling issues of loneliness, family dysfunction, and existential frustration. It was messy, yes, but it also dared to say what many people were thinking about society in the 1990s. Despite lasting 4 seasons, Duckman never broke into mainstream popularity. It was too abrasive, too strange, and too unfiltered. But for late-night viewers who discovered it, the show felt like lightning in a bottle. Today, Duckman is remembered as one of the most daring animated experiments of the decade, a cartoon that proved sarcasm could be just as powerful a weapon as any detective's magnifying glass. Ren and Stimpy, adult party cartoon, 2003. The original Ren and Stimpy was already strange. Gross-out humor, surreal gags, and boundary-pushing episodes made it a Nickelodeon classic. But in 2003, creator John Kricfalusi brought it back with a new mission, to make it for adults only. The result was Ren and Stimpy, adult party cartoon on Spike TV, and it quickly became infamous. The new version exaggerated everything that made the original bizarre. The gross-out humor turned into elaborate, often uncomfortable sequences. The slapstick violence became more disturbing. Even the friendship between Ren and Stimpy twisted into darker territory. Longtime fans expecting nostalgia were instead hit with something more chaotic, and the reaction was split. Some cult audiences loved it. They appreciated the unrestrained creativity, the sense that nothing was off limits, and the sheer audacity of its storytelling. Others were horrified, arguing it lost all the charm and balance of the Nickelodeon days. The show lasted only a handful of episodes before being pulled, leaving behind a reputation as one of animation's strangest reboots. While critics dismissed it, adult party cartoon has earned a place in cult history precisely because of its divisiveness. It showed what happens when you take a weird idea, remove all the guardrails, and let it spiral freely. Love it or hate it, this was Ren and Stimpy Unchained. Clone High 2002 to 2003. What if Abraham Lincoln, Cleopatra, and JFK were all moody high schoolers dealing with crushes, gossip, and cafeteria food? That was the bizarre premise of Clone High, a short-lived but unforgettable cartoon from Phil Lord, Chris Miller, and Bill Lawrence. Airing on MTV, it took the cliches of teen dramas and mashed them together with historical icons, all brought back as teenage clones. The show was packed with parody. Abe was the awkward nice guy. JFK was the overconfident jock. Cleopatra was the manipulative queen bee. Even Gandhi showed up as the hyperactive best friend. It was ridiculous, self-aware, and dripping with satire about both history and teenage angst. Audiences who discovered it loved how fearless it was. The writing was quick, the jokes sharp, and the situations hilariously absurd. But not everyone found it funny. The portrayal of Gandhi sparked international outrage, particularly in India, where protests erupted. The backlash grew so strong that MTV pulled the plug after only one season. Still, Clone High refused to fade away. Over the years, it built a cult following thanks to DVD releases and online fandoms. Fans quoted lines, shared clips, and kept its spirit alive until a revival was announced decades later. For a cartoon that only aired 13 episodes, its legacy is huge. It's proof that even the strangest idea can leave a permanent mark. Liquid Television, 1991 to 1995. Before MTV became home to reality shows, it was experimenting with everything, including a surreal anthology called Liquid Television. Premiering in 1991, it was less of a series and more of a chaotic showcase for experimental shorts, music-driven animation, and downright bizarre sketches. If you wanted safe and predictable, this wasn't it. Liquid Television is best known for introducing cult classics like Aeon Flux and Beavis and Butt-Head, but the entire show was loaded with strange gems. Each episode was a grab bag of styles and tones, ranging from creepy claymation to hyper-stylized art films. Some were funny, some were unsettling, and some barely made sense at all. But that unpredictability was the point. At a time when most cartoons were carefully packaged for kids, Liquid Television was unapologetically aimed at teens and adults. It felt underground, rebellious, and raw. You never knew if the next segment would make you laugh, squirm, or stare in confusion. The show ended in 1995, but its influence can't be overstated. It gave independent animators a platform, it launched careers, and it pushed MTV deeper into adult animation. Today, Liquid Television is remembered as a cult laboratory where weirdness wasn't just allowed, it was celebrated. Beavis and Butt-Head, 1993 to 1997. They were crude, they were obnoxious, They were two teenage couch potatoes who spent most of their time watching music videos and laughing at things they barely understood. And somehow, Beavis and Butt-Head became one of the biggest cult phenomena of the 1990s. Created by Mike Judge, the show exploded onto MTV in 1993. Parents hated it. Teachers blamed it for bad behavior, and critics called it the downfall of culture. But teenagers, they couldn't get enough. Beavis and Butt-Head's mindless commentary on music videos, their idiotic adventures, and their ridiculous catchphrases turned them into anti-heroes of a generation. Of course, controversy followed. Stories spread of kids imitating dangerous stunts, and politicians demanded the show be canceled. MTV eventually moved it to late-night hours, but the backlash only fueled its popularity. The more people complained, the more teens wanted to watch. Despite its crude humor, the show had sharp moments of satire hidden in the stupidity. Mike Judge used his characters to poke fun at pop culture, consumerism, and the very audience watching. Over the years, Beavis and Butt-Head returned in revivals, proving their appeal never really faded. For all their idiocy, the duo carved out a permanent place in cult cartoon history. They showed that sometimes being dumb can change everything. The Head 1994 to 1996. MTV's lineup in the 90s was already packed with oddballs, but The Head might be the strangest of them all. The premise: a regular guy named Jim suddenly wakes up with an oversized, misshapen skull. Turns out, it's housing an alien named Roy, who's hiding out from an intergalactic enemy. If that doesn't scream cult cartoon, nothing does. The show's mix of sci-fi weirdness and low-key human drama made it feel like nothing else on TV. Jim struggled to live a normal life, holding down a job, maintaining relationships, while secretly hosting an alien who occasionally popped out to save the world. The body horror visuals of Roy climbing out of Jim's head were unforgettable, equal parts creepy and funny. What gave The Head staying power was its balance of absurdity and sincerity. Beneath the bizarre setup was a story about loneliness, identity, and finding purpose. Fans didn't just laugh at it, they connected to its offbeat heart. Though it only ran for 2 short seasons, The Head built a small but passionate following. Viewers loved that it dared to be completely bizarre without apology. Today it's remembered as a cult gem, one of the boldest examples of MTV's experimental animation era. Mission Hill, 1999 to 2002. Cartoons about city life usually lean goofy or glamorous, but Mission Hill went for something painfully real. Created by Bill Oakley and Josh Weinstein, veterans of The Simpsons, the show followed Andy, a struggling artist, and his younger brother Kevin, who moves in after their parents leave town. Together, they navigated the ups, downs, and absurdities of urban living. Set in a fictional downtown neighborhood, Mission Hill was bursting with color and style. Its art direction was quirky, with bold lines and eccentric designs that matched the offbeat humor. But beneath the surface jokes was a sharp commentary on 20-something life, dead-end jobs, impossible rent, strained friendships, and dreams that never quite came true. When it premiered on the WB in 1999, it flopped. The network didn't know how to market it, ratings lagged, and it was quickly shelved. But fans who discovered it on Adult Swim or DVD found something special. The characters felt authentic, the writing was both biting and tender, and the show didn't shy away from awkward truths about growing up. Though it only aired 13 episodes, Mission Hill became a cult favorite precisely because it was cut short. It captured the messy reality of young adulthood in ways few animated shows dared, turning failure into legend. Moral Orel 2005 to 2008. At first glance, Moral Orel looked like a harmless throwback. Its claymation style mimicked old-fashioned children's shows, complete with a wide-eyed boy named Orel learning life lessons. But the show quickly revealed itself as something much darker. Instead of cheerful morals, Orel's lessons spiraled into stories about dysfunction, repression, and despair. Premiering on Adult Swim in 2005, the series shocked audiences who expected light parody. The humor was there, but it came wrapped in uncomfortable truths about broken families, authority gone wrong, and the pain that hides beneath cheerful surfaces. Over time, the show evolved into something more ambitious. Later seasons leaned heavily into drama, exploring the emotional scars of its characters with an honesty rarely seen in animation. Fans who stuck with it were blown away. What started as satire grew into a devastating character study, delivered in 15-minute bursts of claymation storytelling. Critics praised it as one of Adult Swim's most daring shows, though its heavy themes eventually led to cancellation. Today, Orel is hailed as a cult masterpiece. It proved that animation could tackle the darkest corners of human experience without losing its bite of humor. And once you've seen it, you never forget it. Superjail, 2007 to 2014. If chaos had a home address, it would be Superjail. This Adult Swim cartoon turned a prison into a psychedelic madhouse where reality bent, guards were insane, and every episode ended in unimaginable carnage. Bright colors, trippy animation, and non-stop brutality clashed together in a way that was equal parts hilarious and horrifying. The premise was simple. A warden ran a prison that operated more like a theme park from another dimension. But instead of order, every attempt at control erupted into explosions, riots, and surreal violence. Each episode followed a loose plot, but the real draw was the final few minutes. Inevitable over-the-top massacres where inmates and guards were annihilated in creatively grotesque ways. Mainstream audiences were baffled, critics were divided, but cult fans, they couldn't get enough. The unique animation style, blending traditional cartoon chaos with experimental visuals, made Superjail unlike anything else on TV. It reveled in its absurdity, daring viewers to either embrace the madness or look away. Though never a ratings juggernaut, it ran for 4 seasons and left a deep mark on Adult Swim's legacy. For many, Superjail stands as the ultimate example of what happens when animators are given absolute freedom to unleash their wildest ideas. The Venture Brothers, 2003 to 2018. Parodying old adventure cartoons is easy. Turning them into a sprawling, heartfelt, and brilliantly written epic is not. The Venture Brothers manage both. Debuting on Adult Swim in 2003, it started as a tongue-in-cheek send-up of Johnny Quest and other pulp adventures. But over 15 years, it grew into one of the most beloved cult cartoons ever made. The show centered on the Venture family, washed-up scientist Dr. Venture, his 2 hapless sons, and their bodyguard, Brock Sampson. At first, it leaned heavily on comedy, mocking the tropes of action-adventure cartoons. But as seasons rolled on, the writing deepened. Characters grew, relationships evolved, and plotlines stretched into complex arcs rivaling prestige dramas. Fans loved how it balanced absurdity with genuine emotion. One moment, you were laughing at ridiculous villains with names like the Monarch, and the next, you were unexpectedly moved by the characters' struggles with failure and identity. That emotional core, combined with razor-sharp parody, gave the Venture Brothers an edge that made it far more than just a comedy. Though it ended in 2018, its cult following remains fierce. To this day, fans debate plotlines, quote characters, and beg for revivals. It proved that parody can be smart, heartfelt, and endlessly rewatchable, a true masterpiece of cult animation. So, there you have it. 15 cult cartoons that went far beyond Saturday morning fluff. Some shocked, some inspired, and some downright confused everyone who watched. But each of them left a mark, proving that animation doesn't have to play by safe rules to matter. Which of these bizarre experiments have you actually seen? And which one blew your mind the most? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit subscribe, and let's keep digging into the wild side of cartoons.